So let's do A Different Man, starring Sebastian Stan, Renata Reinsve, and Adam Pearson. Sebastian Stan, obviously, as we know, mainly from Bucky, as playing Bucky in the Winter Soldier in the Marvel Universe, but has recently, in past years, been breaking out into really interesting roles that we've actually really enjoyed.
We've said his extracururicular activities outside of Marvel, because he's not done yet, right?
Yeah,
his extracurriculars have, I think he's played it the best out of anyone, actually.
He was great in I, Tonya. He was great in Fresh. Even
Pam and Tommy was brilliant in that.
And he's got A Different Man out now, and he's also in The Apprentice, which is coming out later this month as well, where he plays Donald Trump.
Hopefully for next week we'll have that for you.
Yes. Renata Reinsve, of course, was in Worst Person in the World, a film we really liked. She was also in Presumed Innocent. She also, there's quite like a common thread between a lot of her characters. She played Minx. They're minxy characters.
Yeah, sort of like obsessed. Like we obsess over her and ideate over fantasy. Yeah. She's like a fantasized character a little
perhaps, bit. Not also very nice in many ways. Each
character, like a flawed but infantilized person. I think like Worst Person in the World. I think it's really cynical.
As the title
very
cynically.
Yeah, totally.
And Adam Pearson, who is an actor and also disability advocate. People recognize Adam was in Under the Skin, a really pivotal scene that sort of makes the movie move into its third act. Anyway, A Different Man.
And Adam Pearson's last film as well.
Yes, with the director Adam.
Sorry, I meant not Adam
the director
last film, Aaron Schimberg's last film.
Exactly. So, A Different Man follows Sebastian Stan playing Edward, an actor who has a facial difference, who is trying to make his life as an actor. And he lives a very sort of lonely life in New York City in an apartment that has a leaky roof, and he, is very self-conscious and very insulated and isolated because of his appearance. There's a scene where he's on the tube, sort of looking at the people around him, and moving into the building, into the flat next door, is Renata Reinsve, who plays a playwright who befriends him and is completely unfazed and unmoved by his appearance. They begin a friendship between them, and meanwhile his doctor has recommended him to go for an experimental medical treatment that can really alleviate his facial difference, which actually, as an experimental treatment, becomes a bit of a wonder treatment and begins to a transformation that will lead to him, this is not a spoiler, this is the premise of the movie, changing his physical appearance to look like Sebastian Stan and giving him essentially a new life. There's sort of another narrative thread about Renata Reinsve as a playwright putting on a play about her meeting Edward and her interaction with him. And let's just say it's this sort of kind of wry, darkly comic, black comedy, a sort of satirical social satire about be careful what you wish for. And let's just say the change that Edward has in having the face of Sebastian Stan is not quite the change he had anticipated, particularly when he meets Oswald, played by Adam Pearson, who comes into the narrative. I think that's all I need to say for the time being. But yes, wry, dark, social satire. James.
So I was really excited to see this film. I thought it looked very interesting. It looked beautifully shot. Aaron Schimberg is someone who was born with a cleft palate, which is a condition. It's like a facial disfigurement that affects the mouth and a lot of the face. And he's often, with his previous film, has written about the idea of living with a facial disfigurement. And so you can clearly tell that this is written in a very personal, raw, and meaningful way for the person involved. And especially in the beginning, I'm really enjoying this character study. And Sebastian Stan does really well, I think, playing with this idea that, as you said, be careful what you wish for. No matter what you look like, at the end of the day, if you are uncomfortable in your own skin, happiness comes not from the external, but from something within you. And I think that's all really well explored. I think there are great performances. I just ultimately found that it started to work less and less for me the more it goes on. I thought that some of it towards the end, as I think the plot in the second half really starts to unravel, I felt like it was just uneven and thematically lopsided. And I think just towards the end, I didn't connect with it in the way I wanted to. I really, especially in the first half, was ready to connect with a more intricate character study of this person, which I thought was really well set up, and they gave it a lot of time. And I'm seeing this man in his environment navigating through the world. And I thought it was a little bit of a shame that became slightly abandoned for something very different in the end. I didn't have a bad time with it. I still think it's a really interesting idea. But that character study I longed for a bit more in the second half. So I left it scratching my head slightly, thinking this is a little bit uneven. It's not quite the film I thought it was going to be. Nonetheless, very interesting.
I agree. I think that for a film that is very wry and kind of provocative, you could almost wish it had a moment of cathartic payoff, or like
It was missing that.
It was missing a moment where you kind of clap your hands. I actually think it ends on like a kind of brilliant final line that kind of ties it together.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think it does kind of lose its way towards the end. I enjoyed. It kind of sustained itself enough for me in being provocative and different, and the way it kind of engages the audience's pity and then flips it and never makes you feel comfortable with how you sit with some of the themes, and each character seems to have a different side to them. And it's full of strange stylistic choices, like crash zooms. It's shot on very grainy, like 70 film stock, isn't it? And they're like you punch in with these sort of melodramatic zooms. And but I agree. I think even though I was enjoying that was kind of getting me by, great performances all around. It's just missing a moment where like a punchline would land.
I thought it would be more emotional, and actually it's more pointed and surrealist, which I think surprised me. It was interesting seeing this a week apart from the or 2 weeks apart from the substance.
Yes.
Because there's lots of very similar things. There is an element of body horror in this.
Yeah.
There's two versions of the same person, one being abandoned for the other and no seemingly trading, and then seeing a reflection of who you once were. I'm like, oh, what an interesting sort of back this is.
Yeah.
But weirdly, my like any problems I might have had with the substance were similar in this one. Very different films, but just not. Do you know what I mean? It just wasn't like what I expected it to be.
I agree.
In a way.
I think it also reminded me a bit of Dream Scenario that we watched last year, in the same way that
gets
a man
surreal
who's
on
sort
realms,
of kind of dormant gets a moment to awaken and be the person he thinks he wants to be, and that doesn't actually end up being what he wants. I probably think I prefer Dream Scenario, even though they're very, very, very different. And I think again, like. They're so completely different films, but just comparing them a bit, like Dream Scenario would land good comedic set pieces and things that would really be quite biting and uncomfortable. Yeah. Doesn't quite happen here.
It's almost like with this that I really think there was a great, and it's maybe being a bit cynical, you had a really great premise for a film and an entry and a character that you wanted to set up that I thought were great ingredients for pathos and sympathy. And I almost wonder if the idea just slightly ran out of steam, and towards the end it became burdened with this structure of creating a play, and I just don't feel like it ever culminated in something meaningful from the beginning. And I feel like it just unraveled, and then like a treadmill going faster and faster sort of came to a close.
I will say though, I did quite like the fact that, this is not a film like The Elephant Man where it's like, it's all about pity and it's all about, sadness. I think the film is trying to kind of flip that on its head, and that's the kind of the genius of the joke, if you would say the cruel twist of the second half of the movie, with the introduction of Oswald as a character. I appreciate that and I like that, but I agree. So it's kind of interesting. Some good ingredients there. Doesn't quite all come together, but
there is an interesting sort of slightly meta thing that the film addresses, which is there's a play that's being cast about someone who has a very specific facial disfigurement, and they're talking about someone who's not got that condition playing that person, and the film wants to address the fact that Sebastian, although the film is casting someone with that condition, they're also actually also casting someone to play someone who isn't that. And I thought, oh, you are actually aware of what you're trying to say and the criticisms towards it, but like just not quite sort of landing for me on a lot of fronts. But beautiful to look at, very well shot. So if you've seen A Different Man and would like to share your thoughts, please write into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com.